They lit up the silver screen with charm, strength, and smoldering good looks. Audiences adored them. Studios protected them. But behind the Hollywood glamour, some of these leading men hid shocking truths. From abusers to criminals, the real stories are darker than any film noir. These are the 21 classic leading men who were actually terrible people, revealed at last. 1. Errol Flynn. To millions, Errol Flynn was the embodiment of swashbuckling charisma, Robin Hood with a devilish grin and undeniable charm. But off-screen, Flynn's life was steeped in scandal and legal trouble. While his reputation for wild partying was legendary, what truly tarnished his name were two serious statutory assault charges in 1942. Though acquitted, the trial revealed disturbing details about his behavior with underage girls, fueling rumors that dogged him for the rest of his life. Flynn himself didn't do much to dispel his image. In fact, he seemed to relish it. His autobiography was provocatively titled My Wicked, Wicked Ways, and he openly bragged about his womanizing and drug use. Colleagues often described him as unreliable, manipulative, and aggressive, especially when under the influence. His late years were marked by alcoholism and declining health, dying at just 50. While Hollywood tried to keep his image untarnished, behind the studio curtain, Errol Flynn was no hero. 2. Kirk Douglas. Kirk Douglas was admired for his powerful performances and commanding screen presence, but his personal life carries disturbing allegations. Known for his ruthless ambition, he reportedly burned bridges and betrayed colleagues to rise to stardom. But most damning are the long-standing rumors that he assaulted Natalie Wood when she was a teenager. Though the accusation never led to formal charges, Wood's sister Lana and various biographers have pointed the finger, and many believe the incident was deliberately buried by the Hollywood machine to protect Douglas's image. Even outside of that scandal, he had a reputation for being cold and calculating. Directors and co-stars have recalled his domineering nature and explosive temper. Despite receiving accolades late in life, including a Presidential Medal of Freedom, the shadow of his alleged crimes continues to haunt his legacy, raising hard questions about the difference between a great actor and a decent man. Bing Crosby. Bing Crosby's voice defined an era. His Christmas albums warmed hearts across the world. But inside his home, a much colder man existed. According to his own sons, Crosby was a strict, emotionally abusive father who ruled with an iron fist. Gary Crosby, one of his 4 sons, wrote a tell-all book detailing years of beatings, humiliation, and psychological cruelty. He described his father as cold, unaffectionate, and obsessed with control. Bing was also said to have kept his children on a rigid schedule, forced them into extreme discipline, and rarely showed approval or kindness. Though some defenders claimed he was a product of his time, many saw his behavior as excessively cruel, even for the era. Co-stars also reported that Bing could be aloof and difficult on set. While he cultivated the image of America's gentle crooner, behind the scenes was a man shaped by emotional repression and a toxic need for dominance. 4. John Wayne. John Wayne stood as the symbol of rugged American masculinity. But beneath the cowboy boots and war films lay a man with deeply troubling views. Wayne was an outspoken supporter of McCarthyism, testifying against fellow actors during the Red Scare, and helping blacklist artists accused of communist sympathies. But worse still was a 1971 Playboy interview in which Wayne unapologetically voiced racist and white supremacist beliefs. He dismissed Native American land claims, supported slavery as a necessary evil, and opposed civil rights advances. For decades, his fans defended him, blaming the times. but his words were chilling even then. Wayne was also known for his temper and mistreatment of colleagues. On set, he was domineering, especially toward female co-stars, often mocking or belittling them. Though he's hailed as an American icon, John Wayne's off-screen persona reveals a man whose convictions and conduct tarnish his cinematic legacy. 5. Clark Gable. Clark Gable, the king of Hollywood, charmed millions with his suave demeanor and signature mustache. But off-camera, Gable had a reputation for cruelty, bigotry, and manipulation. Though adored for his performance in Gone with the Wind, behind the scenes he allegedly had an affair with co-star Vivien Leigh, then ghosted her cruelly. Worse still are persistent rumors that Gable may have raped actress Loretta Young during the filming of Call of the Wild in 1935. Decades later, Young, who became pregnant and bore Gable's child, would refer to the encounter as date rape, though she never named him directly in early years. She reportedly felt pressured by Catholic guilt and societal shame to stay silent. Gable also had a notorious drinking problem and was known to treat women with casual disregard. Despite his glittering star image, the truth paints a picture of a man whose charm masked deeply troubling behavior. 6. Marlon Brando. Marlon Brando was a revolutionary actor, method to the core, raw, emotional, and magnetic. His performances in A Streetcar Named Desire, On the Waterfront, and The Godfather are legendary. But the man behind the camera was often selfish, erratic, and disturbingly cruel. Known for his arrogance, Brando frequently disrespected directors, refused to memorize lines, and would sabotage productions if he felt slighted. Co-stars described him as charming one minute and emotionally manipulative the next. His personal life was even darker. Brando had numerous tumultuous relationships, fathered at least 11 children, and emotionally neglected many of them. The most tragic result was his son Christian's murder of his sister's boyfriend, a case soaked in years of family dysfunction. His daughter Cheyenne later took her own life. In interviews, Brando showed little accountability, often blaming Hollywood or society rather than his own choices. Though he was a genius on screen, off-screen he was often a tyrant wrapped in tortured genius, a man capable of great empathy in his roles, but devastating cruelty in real life. 7. Tony Curtis. Tony Curtis epitomized charm, humor, and classic Hollywood glamour. From Some Like It Hot to Spartacus, he was beloved for his wit and matinee idol looks, but those who knew him personally tell a far more troubling story. Curtis was addicted to fame and drugs, often neglecting his family and children in pursuit of fleeting pleasures. His daughter, actress Jamie Lee Curtis, has spoken openly about her father's emotional absence and selfish behavior. Tony married 6 times and left a trail of broken relationships and bitter fallouts. His autobiography revealed a narcissist who cared more about his reflection than the people around him. He was known to lie, manipulate, and cheat his way through both business and personal life. Co-stars remembered him as insecure and deeply competitive, rarely gracious to those he felt threatened by. Though his film legacy remains intact, Curtis's real-life antics left scars that never fully healed, especially among those closest to him. 8. Robert Mitchum. Robert Mitchum projected the ultimate bad boy persona on screen, and off-screen, he didn't bother hiding the fact that he was just as rebellious. While Hollywood adored his stoic charm and sleepy-eyed smolder, Mitchum's real-life behavior was far from romantic. In 1948, he was arrested in a high-profile marijuana sting, spending time in jail and nearly destroying his career. But even more disturbing were his frequent acts of verbal and physical aggression. Mitchum was openly misogynistic in interviews, often speaking of women as objects or nuisances. He had a penchant for bar fights and regularly antagonized fellow actors and directors. While some excused his antics as tough guy behavior, others described him as a bully who used his fame to intimidate. Behind the cool exterior was a man who played by no rules but his own, often leaving chaos in his wake. His charm, it turns out, was just another form of control. 9. Frank Sinatra. To the public, Frank Sinatra was the voice of romance, the Rat Pack king with swagger, generosity, and unparalleled talent. But Sinatra's darker side was rarely hidden. He had well-documented ties to organized crime, including friendships with mob bosses and suspected involvement in illegal activities that the FBI investigated for decades. Beyond that, he was emotionally volatile and physically intimidating. Known for his explosive temper, Sinatra allegedly assaulted photographers, journalists, and even women who crossed him. His relationships were often turbulent and abusive. His marriage to Ava Gardner was a roller coaster of passion and violence. Sinatra wielded his fame like a weapon, using it to silence critics and manipulate studios. He blackballed actors and crew who disagreed with him, and wasn't above sabotaging careers out of spite. While fans swooned over his ballads, many in the industry feared the man behind the music. Sinatra's charm may have opened doors, but his temper burned many bridges. 10th Lawrence. Olivier Lawrence. Olivier was widely regarded as one of the greatest actors of the 20th century, a Shakespearean powerhouse who conquered both stage and screen. But his personal life and off-screen demeanor painted a far more complex and troubling portrait. Olivier was notoriously cold and emotionally detached, especially with those closest to him. His marriage to Vivien Leigh, herself suffering from bipolar disorder, was marked by cruelty. Rather than supporting her, Olivier reportedly belittled her mental illness, dismissed her breakdowns, and eventually abandoned her as she spiraled into despair. Professionally, Olivier was ruthlessly ambitious, often undermining fellow actors and using his status to block others from success. Several contemporaries described him as vain and self-serving, more concerned with legacy than loyalty. While he maintained a regal, composed image for the public, behind closed doors he wielded power with a quiet cruelty. The man revered as theatrical royalty may have ruled the stage, but with an icy, unforgiving heart. 11. Steve McQueen. Steve McQueen was the king of cool, a cultural icon who defined the anti-hero archetype of 1960s and 70s cinema. With piercing eyes, rugged charm, and a motorcycle always nearby, McQueen was adored by fans and revered on screen. But off-screen, he was a tempest of violence, paranoia, and narcissism. Known for his massive ego and explosive temper, McQueen regularly terrorized those around him, including his wives. His first wife, Naile Adams, later detailed in her memoir the years of physical abuse, infidelity, and emotional trauma she endured. Despite his fame, McQueen remained deeply insecure and suspicious, frequently accusing colleagues of betrayal. He had a massive substance abuse problem and was notorious for clashing with directors, often walking off set or demanding script rewrites. He cheated compulsively and bragged about his explicit conquests while neglecting his children. Though his screen image projected rebellion and strength, his real-life behavior reflected deep cruelty, masked by bravado. 12. James Kagny. James Kagny was a tough guy on screen, playing gangsters and rebels with fiery conviction. Off-screen, many believed he was cut from the same cloth. While not a womanizer or drug abuser like others on this list, Kagny was infamous for his iron-fisted control, political extremism, and a vindictive streak that often turned friends into enemies. Known to hold grudges for years, Kagny operated with a cold precision that alienated collaborators. He was involved with right-wing groups during Hollywood's darkest period, the Blacklist era, and actively distanced himself from colleagues who held progressive views. He also had a reputation for underpaying or exploiting behind-the-scenes staff, while championing his own moral superiority in interviews. Though he later retreated from public life and softened with age, those who worked closely with him described a man who demanded loyalty but rarely offered it in return. For all his screen presence, the man behind the roles was far less admirable. 13. Spencer Tracy Spencer. Tracy was lauded as one of the most naturally gifted actors of the Golden Age, known for his humility and depth. But privately, Tracy battled a dark duality, a raging alcoholic who became aggressive and unpredictable. Though he was married for decades, he conducted a long and secretive affair with Katharine Hepburn, one that left emotional scars on both sides. Hepburn herself admitted that Tracy was volatile and at times emotionally abusive, especially when drunk. He refused to divorce his wife, yet also refused to be fully present for Hepburn, keeping her in an emotionally liminal space for years. Tracy's alcoholism affected his work, leading to delays, outbursts, and personal conflicts. He often demanded special treatment from studios and intimidated directors into submission. While he was revered for his on-screen gravitas, his private life told a story of a man tormented by guilt, rage, and a need for control that hurt the people closest to him. 14. Robert Taylor. Robert Taylor was MGM's Goldens. Boy, handsome, soft-spoken, and widely respected. But behind his quiet charm lay a man who played a pivotal role in one of Hollywood's darkest chapters. During the height of the Red Scare, Taylor served as a friendly witness for the House Un-American Activities Committee, voluntarily naming colleagues he believed to be communists. His testimony helped blacklist fellow actors and writers, destroying careers and livelihoods. Taylor later defended his actions as patriotic, but many saw them as cowardly and opportunistic. Beyond politics, he was also known for being cold and calculating in personal relationships. His marriage to Barbara Stanwyck, often seen as a model Hollywood union, was riddled with distance and emotional neglect. Friends said Taylor was aloof, career-obsessed, and more interested in image than intimacy. Though he maintained a clean reputation during his lifetime, his legacy is marred by betrayal, not just of friends, but of the very ideals Hollywood pretended to celebrate. 15. Tyrone Power. Tyrone Power was a heartthrob of the 1930s and 40s, known for his romantic leads and smoldering good looks. But, off-camera, Power's life was a tangle of infidelity, manipulation, and cruelty. He was notorious for juggling affairs, even during his marriages, and leaving emotional wreckage behind. His first wife, actress Annabella, was devastated when Power left her abruptly for another woman after years of marriage. He repeated this pattern with other women, often using charm to seduce them, and then abandoning them with little warning. Power also had a reputation for using his status to pressure young actresses into relationships. Biographers have pointed out that he cared little for emotional consequences, chasing pleasure with reckless abandon. While his military service in World War II earned him respect, his post-war years saw a return to destructive patterns. Though his early death at age 44 shocked Hollywood, it also spared him the long-term accountability many now demand from fallen idols. 16. George Raft. George Raft was the real deal, a man who didn't just play gangsters on screen, but lived among them off-screen. Known for his roles in crime dramas like Scarface and They Drive by Night, Raft had undeniable charisma and streetwise style. But his deep, well-documented ties to organized crime raised serious ethical questions about his character. Raft was close friends with infamous mobsters like Bugsy Siegel and Meyer Lansky, often intervening on their behalf. In fact, it's believed that he helped save several mafia members from jail by pulling strings in Hollywood. His connections also gave him a dangerous edge in show business. He allegedly threatened studio heads, sabotaged rival actors' careers, and intimidated anyone who crossed him. Even worse, Raft's gambling habits were legendary, and he was often bailed out by shady characters with unsavory motives. Though he was never convicted of a crime, Raft's reputation as a Hollywood front for the underworld has endured. Beneath his cool facade was a man willing to bend any rule, legal or moral, for the right payoff. 17. James Mason. James Mason, with his velvety voice and refined manner, was long considered one of the most intelligent and elegant actors of his time. But behind his cultured screen image lurked a man whose private life was riddled with disturbing contradictions. His marriage to Pamela Mason was notoriously toxic and volatile, filled with infidelity, emotional manipulation, and bitter public spats. Both were unfaithful, but James was particularly cold in how he treated lovers and family. His daughter, Portland Mason, was raised in an emotionally chaotic environment and later described her upbringing as traumatic. James was also known to have relationships with much younger women, exploiting his status and intellect to seduce and discard them. Despite his private persona of dignity, many close to him described him as condescending, egotistical, and emotionally remote. While critics celebrated his performances, the people around him experienced a man who weaponized charm and intelligence to control, humiliate, and dominate. 18. Charlton Heston. Charlton. Heston was a towering figure in Hollywood epics like Ben-Hur and the Ten Commandments, a symbol of stoic heroism and moral authority. Yet his legacy is sharply divided. In his later years, Heston became a controversial political figure, known for his extreme views and aggressive leadership of the National Rifle Association. While he once marched with Martin Luther King Jr., Heston's turn toward right-wing extremism in the 90s shocked many. He spoke out against gun control laws with inflammatory rhetoric and became a poster child for a radical interpretation of the Second Amendment. But even earlier in his life, Heston was reportedly difficult to work with, rigid, controlling, and dismissive of those who challenged him. Co-stars and crew found him pompous and overly moralistic, often lecturing others on set. Though he portrayed heroes on screen, in real life he alienated colleagues, politicized his legacy, and used his influence to divide rather than uplift. The man who once parted the Red Sea left behind a legacy more controversial than divine. 19th. Rex Harrison. Rex Harrison charmed audiences with his cultured accent and sophisticated presence in films like My Fair Lady and Dr. Dolittle. But behind the scenes, Harrison earned the nickname Sexy Rexy, not for his allure, but for his scandalous behavior and string of destructive relationships. He was known to be arrogant, domineering, and emotionally abusive, especially toward women. His first wife, actress Lily Palmer, endured years of neglect and infidelity before their marriage collapsed. Harrison's second wife, actress Carol Landis, died by suicide shortly after their affair ended. He was widely criticized for callously leaving her the night she took her own life. Instead of showing remorse, Harrison tried to distance himself from the scandal and continued on with his career. He also had a reputation for being insufferable on set, demanding, dismissive of co-stars, and prone to belittling those he considered beneath him. Though he won an Academy Award and remained a staple of British and American cinema, his real-life behavior cast a long shadow. Harrison's refined characters were a mask for a man whose charm hid cruelty, entitlement, and devastating emotional fallout for those in his path. 20th Dean Martin. Dean Martin was the smooth-talking crooner, the life of the party, and one-third of the legendary Rat Pack. On stage, he appeared laid-back, charming, and endlessly charismatic. But the man behind the whiskey glass was far more aloof, emotionally distant, and, at times, downright mean. While his public image was that of a good-natured drinker, many insiders say the boozy persona was largely a mask, one that allowed Martin to keep people at arm's length. He was a heavy drinker in real life, too, and his alcoholism often strained personal and professional relationships. Martin's parenting was almost non-existent, with several of his children describing him as absent and disinterested. He could go weeks without speaking to family or friends, and when he did, he was often sarcastic, cold, or dismissive. On set, Martin often phoned in performances, resenting rehearsals and sometimes refusing to take direction. He also had a cruel sense of humor, mocking those who didn't live up to his standards. For someone considered a lovable rogue, Dean Martin left many in his wake who found him bitterly hard to love in real life. 21st. Gary Cooper. Gary Cooper was the strong, silent hero of the Golden Age, an icon of moral uprightness in films like High Noon and Sergeant York. But off-screen, his personal life was steeped in infidelity, political hypocrisy, and emotional manipulation. Though married for decades, Cooper was notorious for a string of affairs with younger actresses, including Patricia Neal, whom he left heartbroken and isolated. Neal later admitted she considered suicide after Cooper ended their relationship under pressure from his wife and Catholic guilt. While Cooper projected an image of stoic integrity, he was quietly involved in the Hollywood blacklist era, siding with conservative studios and supporting HUAC investigations, despite working with artists who were targeted. He never spoke out for those blacklisted, some of whom were his friends. His emotional detachment extended to his family, with his daughter Maria later revealing how absent and emotionally inaccessible he was throughout her childhood. The real Gary Cooper was a man of contradictions, a cinematic hero whose real-world actions often betrayed the virtues he so famously portrayed on screen. Behind every dazzling smile and iconic performance was a hidden truth, a darker side masked by fame and protected by studios. These men defined an era, but not always for the better. Their legacies force us to confront a hard reality. Talent can captivate, but character is what endures.